This duel is called a rather very big mistake. In this duel, there were a couple of times when I was put in a difficult position, and it doesn't help that I did make a mistake along the way, but the mistake that I did make was small compared to that of what my opponent makes. The deck I use is my favorite deck out of all the decks I have, because it is very unpredictable. Yes, it does have plenty of banned cards, and yes, it does have a couple of anime-only cards as well, which you may argue is 100% illegal in official tournament play, which it is, no questions asked, but in casual play, all bets are off and every card is allowed. What makes this deck very unpredictable is how there isn't any strict structure to it. I didn't make this deck focusing on any particular strategy, which most decks have, but instead this deck may look to any professional tournament player as a bunch of cards that have been thrown together without much thought, but because it doesn't have any strategy, it allows you to create one as you go along, or in other words, just make it up as you go along. You may be hoping for the best with that, because you are relying on the luck of the draw above all else, but this deck is jam-packed full of useful cards, albeit illegal cards, that you can rely on drawing what you need that turn. However, relying solely on the draw above all else is its own weakness, because you may not draw exactly what you need, but because you are allowed to do whatever you want with this deck without following any strategy, that rarely happens, as instead of waiting for a particular card to kickstart your strategy and having to use certain cards to defend yourself, which ultimately uses the cards you need to complete your strategy. With this deck, 99% of the time, you can use any card that you draw the turn. This deck can give even the strongest decks the run for their money, purely because of its unpredictable nature. My opponent's deck turns the tables and gives my deck a run for its money. It includes many trap cards that are designed to obliterate the opponent's deck by sending as many cards as it can to the graveyard, until the opposing deck doesn't have any cards left to draw and automatically loses. As well as those trap cards, my opponent did include one Egyptian god card, Slifer the Sky Dragon. In a way, Slifer does benefit from being in this deck, but it can be somewhat difficult to build up its attack and defense. But when things go right, Slifers can be a fearsome monster. Fortunately for me, he doesn't get the chance to play it. Turn 1, unlike the previous duel, we do only have 40 cards in our decks. I learned my lesson about having too many cards in my deck during the last duel. The first 5 cards that I drew, I can play, but only to set things up for future turns. The first card that I play is a spell card, the Forceful Sentry, which allows me to pick one card in my opponent's hand and return it to his deck. This isn't the most effective of moves, I will admit that, but it does come in handy when your opponent is about to unleash something big onto the field. If you can shuffle it back into the deck, they would have to wait to redraw it once more, and that can mess up their plans a lot. Sometimes, however, I use it just so that I can look at my opponent's hand, so that I would be able to some idea of what they may be playing during their turns, which gives me the chance to defend myself. From what we can see, he has the monster, Ra's Disciple, which if he summons to the field, he would be able to special summon 2 more, and that would help him in summoning his Egyptian god monster, Slifer the Sky Dragon. The card that I decided to shuffle back into his deck is the trap card known as Deck Destruction Virus, which is a deadly card. Whenever a fiend-type monster is destroyed, you can activate this card, and 10 random cards from my deck would be sent to the graveyard. The more fiend-type monsters I destroy, the more cards will be sent to the graveyard. From seeing that card in his hand, and knowing my opponent, I knew instantly that there were 3 copies of Deck Destruction Virus hidden within his deck. Having 3 copies of any card gives you much better odds of drawing the card, but at least I delayed its activation for a few more turns yet, maybe even prevented him from playing it altogether this duel. The other move that I make during this turn is setting a monster face down in defense position. I have a choice of 3 cards to set, Magician of Faith, whose effect isn't useful at this point, but I will explain it later on. Revival Jar, which is very useful, but because it is only the beginning of the duel, it wouldn't have been as useful as it can be. The third monster, Sangan, has the effect which when it is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, I am able to add 1 monster with 1500 or less from my deck to my hand. I'll tell you now that Sangan's effect does activate, but the card that I pick, I will tell you about as and when. I end my turn. Turn 2, the card that he draws is the monster, Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 6. Due to it being a level 6 monster, it requires a tribute in order to summon it to the field. He figured that, due to the cards he has in his hand and it being only at the early stages of the duel, that the monster to play is his gerbo. He was meant to set it face down in defense position, but he makes the mistake of playing it in face-up attack position. Being in that position, I now have the chance to attack and destroy it, inflicting some damage to his life points. But he quenches that temptation of attacking by placing 2 cards face down. For all I knew at the time, they could be 2 trap cards that could damage me in some way. From what we can see from the replay, is that only of them is a trap card, Destruction Trigger. This card can also punch a huge dent in my deck. When a card of his is destroyed by a card effect, 5 cards from the top of my deck will be forced to the graveyard. The spell card that he plays is known as Card of Desperation, and you really do have to be very desperate to play it. To be honest, I have no idea why he included this card in his deck. When it is played, he is allowed to draw 3 cards, but then, the entirety of the rest of his deck will be dumped to the graveyard, preventing him from drawing on his next turn, which would mean he would have to pull off some epic move in order to secure his victory. Otherwise he would automatically lose from being unable to draw a card his next turn. Fortunately, for his own sake, he doesn't play it. He ends his turn. Turn 3, the spell card that I drew is considered by many as broken, because of how powerful it is without any drawbacks. I subsequently play it and instantly wipe out both of his face-down cards, sending them straight to the graveyard. Now, I could attack his gerbo, sending it to the graveyard as well, and I wouldn't be working into a traps, but I decided against attack him as I needed to think about building up my defense first. The last thing I want to do is go in all guns blazing and then find myself falling face first onto the ground wondering what on earth happened. The monster that I set face down is Magician of Faith. Its effect, if it is allowed to activate, will now come in handy. There wasn't anything else that I could do, so I end my turn. Turn 4, if I knew what he had in his hand, then I would have attacked his gerbo, but since I didn't, then I didn't attack. When he sacrificed his monster to normal summon, Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 6, I did wish that I had attacked. With 2300 attack points and an effect that prevents it from being affected by spell cards, and a second effect that allows him to special summon yet another, even stronger monster at the end of this turn, this monster is strong. He attacks my face-down monster, Sangan, destroying it and sending it straight to the graveyard. Now that it is there, its effect automatically activates. The monster that I choose to add to my hand from my deck is Honest. Honest is an incredibly powerful card. So powerful in fact, it can defeat any one of the Egyptian god monsters without breaking a sweat. The number of cards that I could have chosen instead of Honest were plentiful, but I decided upon Honest, because I figured that, because my opponent likes his Egyptian god monsters, I might be able to stand some chance against them if he manages to successfully summons any one of the 3, if not all this duel. Luckily, that doesn't happen, but it never hurts to be safe than sorry. He ends his turn, and that means his monster's effect activates. He can use his monster as a tribute in order to special summon Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 8. Horus is a formidable monster. With 3000 attack, and an effect that can negate the activation of any spell cards and destroy them, with only one face-down monster on my side of the field, I had to draw something decent, otherwise there is a strong possibility that I would be taking a massive hit next turn. His turn officially ends. Turn 5, in any other situation, the spell card, Reigeki, is nothing but decent. This card is so powerful, it can make people surrender because it has rendered them incapable of doing anything else. If my opponent had 5 monsters of the field, this card would be able to wipe them out in one hit. Not only that, but, because it doesn't target any specific monster, it obliterates all. It can actually destroy the Egyptian god monsters. This card is so powerful, you may make the mistake of wasting its full potential. When I first made this deck, I did exactly that, but the more I got used to it, I learned that if I am patient, I would be able to do some serious damage without looking back. In this situation though, if I used it, it would be wasting it. If I activated it, Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 8 would not be destroyed, because its effect prevents it from being destroyed. So whilst I did draw something dominative, I didn't use it. Instead, I set Revival Gem face down. I hoped that it would be enough, because there wasn't that much else that I could do. I end my turn. Turn 6, he draws and then normal summons in attack position, Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 4. This is the weakest of the 3 Horus's cards. During the end phase of a turn that Horus destroyed a monster, my opponent would then be able to special summon, from his hand or deck, Horus level 6. The moment I saw Horus level 4, I knew what he would be doing. He would be trying to summon as many Horus level 8s as he could. If he were able to have more than one Horus level 8 on the field, then it would spell big trouble for me. He attacks. Horus level 4 destroys my face-down revival gem, which allows its effect to automatically activate. During my next standby phrase, I would be able to special summon revival gem from my graveyard in defense position. He then instructs Horus level 8 to attack and destroy my face-down Magician of Faith, which in turn allows its effect to automatically activate. Now I am able to add one spell card of my choosing from my graveyard to my hand, and I chose Harpy's Feather Duster. Now my field is bare. But my opponent cannot attack anymore, so he ends his turn. He tributes Horus level 4 and special summon Horus level 6 from his deck. Turn 7, I draw the level 8 monster, Dark Magician of Chaos. During my standby phrase, Revival Gem's effect kicks in, allowing it to special summon itself back onto the field in defense position. You see, due to Revival Gem's effect, if it isn't negated somehow, I would always have at least one monster on the field. But one monster isn't enough since when it is destroyed, my opponent can then attack me directly. Luckily, in my graveyard, I have the necessary requirements to special summon a monster that can stand up to Horus level 8. Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End cannot be normal summoned. It also cannot be special summoned except by removing one light and one dark monster from my graveyard. I remove the 2 monsters, Sangan, whose attribute is dark, and Magician of Faith, whose attribute is light, from play. Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End can be considered as the most broken monster in the entire game, because of how easy it is to special summon, and its effect. I will tell you now that its effect wouldn't be useful to me in this situation. I am only summoning it to defend myself against Horus level 8. To activate its effect, I would have to pay 1000 life points. Once I've done that, all cards on the field and in both players' hand will be sent to the graveyard, and my opponent will be inflicted with 300 damage for each and every single card sent to the graveyard via this effect. For example, the total sum on cards on the field and in our hands add up to 10. That means, once all 10 cards are sent to the graveyard, my opponent will be receiving 3000 points of damage, reducing his life points from 8000 to 5000. We would then have no cards in our hands or on the field, meaning we would have to rely purely on our draw. As I said before, relying on the luck of the draw is what my deck does best. But, during the turn that the monster is special summoned, I cannot activate the effect, because it needs some limitations. I then do something that to this day, I still have no idea why I did it. I activated the spell card, Raigeki. It's pointless to do so, because Horus level 8 can simply negate its activation, therefore completely and utterly wasting the card. I should have kept it in my hand to be used at a later turn, but no, I used it this turn and wasted it. I wasn't happy with myself that I did that, but it happened and so there was no point on crying over spilt milk. The duel must carry on. I attacked Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 6 with Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End, destroying it and sending it to the graveyard, inflicting 700 damage to his life points. Now that Horus level 6 is out of the picture, it would prevent him from special summoning Horus level 8 for a while. I end my turn. Turn 8, YGOPro has many counterparts. The one my opponent draws and now has 2 copies in his hand is called Sakura Bow. I will tell you of its effect when it is activated. It is a strong effect to say the least, and was one that did start pushing me into a corner. All he does this turn is place Sakura Bow face down in defense position. Turn 9, I drew the Monster Morphing Jar, which I subsequently set face down in defense position. This card's effect can come in handy, but it can also be very disadvantageous as well. It does need to be used with caution and with confidence. Its effect is simple. Both players must discard their entire hand to the graveyard and draw 5 new cards. It can be useful in how it gives me a fresh hand, but it can backfire in how it gives my opponent a fresh hand as well. It is a risky move, but it is one that I must take if I am to be victorious in this duel. Because it forces us to discard our entire hand, I set the spell card, Harpy's Feather Duster, face down on the field, so that it won't be sent to the graveyard. I would also have done that with Ryugeki, but through my own stupidity, it is now sitting in my graveyard, not being very useful in the slightest. I don't attack. I figured that it would be best for me if I act upon my own plan before sharing with my opponent. I wouldn't class this as a risk as such, because we have two equally as powerful monsters on the field. I didn't want to activate Chaos Emperor Dragon's effect, as that would get rid of it, and it is being so much more helpful being on the field than it would ever be in the graveyard, in this particular situation anyway. I end my turn. Turn 10, he draws another Horus level 8, which he won't be able to summon. He doesn't do anything this turn except set his second Sakura bow face down. Turn 11, I draw the spell card, Mystical Space Typhoon, which allows me to select and destroy one spell card on the field. There are no spell cards or trap cards on the field, so I don't need to play it. What I do, however, is place it face down next to Harpy's Feather Duster. Once it is there, it will hopefully remain there until when needed, so that it won't be sent to the graveyard when Morphing Jar's effect activates. I also play the Set the Monster, Honest, face down on the field. With it being there, it adds to my defense, plus, I might be able to use its effect to deflect an attack my opponent may send my way. I don't get the chance to use Honest's effect this duel. I attack his face-down monster, which is revealed to be his Sakura bow. It is destroyed and sent to the graveyard. Now that it is there, my Chaos Emperor Dragon may be in trouble. I end my turn. Turn 12, he draws his second copy of Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 4. He normal summons it to the field, and attacks my Revival Gem with it. Once again, Revival Gem's effect automatically activates, allowing it to return to the field during my next standby phase. He then attacks my Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End, with Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 8. In any other scenario, with the two monsters having the same amount of attack points, they both would have been destroyed and sent to the graveyard. But, now that he has a Sakura bow in his graveyard, he can activate its effect, which, by removing it from play, the monster that would have been destroyed during this battle remains on the field whilst the other monster is destroyed. My Chaos Emperor Dragon is destroyed and sent to the graveyard. With that gone, my strongest defense has been eliminated. He ends his turn. Horus level 4's effect activates, allowing him to special summon, from his deck, Horus level 6. Turn 13, the card that I drew is the monster known as Wall of Illusion. It does have a very effective ability, which when it is attacked, it forces the attacking monster to return to the owner's hand. This can be especially effective when the attacking monster is from the extra deck, such as a Synchro monster, a Fusion monster, or a Z's monster. They do not return to the hand, they must return to the extra deck. Some monsters, especially Fusion and Synchro monsters, are particularly difficult to summon if the necessary requirements are not met. In my situation, its effect would be very helpful, as it would send Horus level 8 back to my opponent's hand, bearing in mind that it is that monster that attacks Wall of Illusion. If not, then I will have to think of another way to defeat Horus level 8. During my standby phase, Revival Gem returns to the field once more in defense position. I place Wall of Illusion face down. Next, I flip summon Morphing Jar face up, activating its effect. We must discard our entire hand to the graveyard. I've managed to make it so that I only discard one card, Magician of Black Chaos. Even though it is a level 8 monster with a strong attack and effect, I'm not worried that it is going to my graveyard, because I am confident about what I will be drawing when I pick up my 5 new cards. My opponent must discard his 2 cards, which consist of Horus level 8 and Ras Disciple. I was pleased that I had gotten rid of them, but that doesn't stop them from returning in some way. I couldn't think about that possibility at this moment. I had to think about what I was about to draw. 4 very useful cards, and 1 semi-useful card. I set 2 trap cards, Draining Shield, and MacGeyser, both of which I will tell you what they do when they are activated late on this duel, but both are helpful. I end my turn. Turn 14, as I've said before, activating Morphing Jar's effect is a risky move. When he draws, he now has 6 cards in his hand. He has 3 trap cards in his hand. One I've already talked about. The other 2 can be devastating, to say the least. He sets all 3 trap cards on the field. They are monster register, mirror force, and deck destruction virus. I've already talked about the destructive capabilities of deck destruction virus. The other two are equally as destructive in their own way. Out of the three, only monster register and mirror force will be successfully activated, so I will tell you about them when they are. Just remember though, I have the spell card, Harpy's Feather Duster, sitting on the field. He, once again, was meant to set Kerbo face down, but accidentally, but possibly deliberately placed it face up so that he would entice me to attack it, therefore, purposefully driving me away from his other monsters, keeping them on the field for another turn yet. But then, he made an unexpected move by consciously attacking my face-up morphing jar. I didn't know what he was planning by doing this move, because I didn't know what he expected from it. Kerbo's attack is only 300, whereas morphing jar's 700, which means he loses 400 life points. Kerbo is sent to the graveyard. My only guess is that he actually did make the mistake of summoning it in attack position, and didn't want me to attack it and lose a bunch of life points, so he decided to attack my monster, have it destroyed, so that his stronger monsters can defend his life points instead. Whatever the motive, it happened, and as unexpected as it was, we moved on and didn't speak about it ever again. He attacked my revival gem with Horus level 6. I did ask why he didn't attack my morphing jar, and he replied with the answer, because I accidentally clicked that monster instead, to which I responded with, well, it doesn't matter anyway, because I activate my trap card, Draining Shield. Draining Shield negates the attacking monster's attack, and I then gain life points equal to the monster's attack. In this case, I gain 2,300 life points, increasing them from 8,000 to 10,300. Revival Gem's effect automatically activates once more. His third and final attack sees Horus level 8 attacking morphing jar. I then activate the spell card, Mystical Space Typhoon. I shouldn't have done that, because due to Horus level 8's effect, the spell card is negated and it is destroyed. I then lose 2,300 life points, bringing them back down to 8,000. Morphing jar is destroyed and sent to the graveyard. I then activate my face-down trap card, MacLeod. I can only activate this card when the monster of mine is sent to the graveyard via battle. I can select and destroy one monster on the field. In this case, Horus level 8. Finally, it is destroyed. I can now begin to work up an offense, but I still must keep a strong defense as I have no idea what else he has in that deck. He ends his turn. Turn 15, I draw the trap card, Exchange of the Spirit, which I will explain later on. During my standby phrase, Revival Gem comes back, and my opponent activates the trap card, Monster Register, which he must pay 1,000 life points in order to do so. Now, whenever any one of us summons a monster, we must pay a price. If I summon a level 4 monster, the top 4 cards from my deck will be sent to the graveyard. If I summon a level 6 monster, then 6 cards will be sent. And if I summon a level 8 monster, then 8 cards will be sent. This can be especially destructive to my deck as it doesn't only just send as many cards as it can to the graveyard, and those cards being what I need, but if it manages to successfully send my entire rest of my deck to the graveyard, then, when it comes to my next turn, I will automatically lose the duel. However, this card comes with a massive drawback, because, not only does it affect me, it also affects him as well whenever he summons a monster. From now on, we have to be careful with what we summon as it can change the tables, possibly, for the worst. I then activate Harpy's Feather Duster, destroying his cards, preventing me from losing any cards whenever I summon a monster. I set Exchange of the Spirit face down, and Change of Heart, which is a powerful spell card. I then activate the spell card, Mystic Box. I must select one monster, and my opponent must select one of his monsters. His selected monster is destroyed, and my selected monster changes sides, so he will then have control of that monster. But, Horus level 6 negates that, renders its activation pointless. I end my turn. Turn 16, I knew how my opponent works because we've duelled each other many times before. I know that he likes to have 3 copies of most of his cards. I didn't know what he drew at the time, but when he activates it in the near future, I was not the least bit surprised to see that it was another monster register. I've destroyed one, but another one took its place. Now, I am waiting for the third one to pop up sooner or later. He normal summons Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 4 in attack position. he attacks my revival gem. This is the only time that I wished its effect wouldn't automatically activate, because, when it does, the top 4 cards from my deck will be sent to the graveyard, no questions asked. It was as if he knew exactly what I was going to play, and he was simply just waiting until he could play his cards to whack me one in the face as hard as he could. But I remained calm, and began to think my way out of this before I sank any further into his trap. He attacks my face-down Wall of Illusion with Horus level 6. Wall of Illusion's effect activates, forcing his monster to return to his hand. But, when he ends his turn, Horus level 4 allows him to summon Horus level 6 right back again. At least there is one less monster than before. Turn 17, a lot happens in a short amount of time. First, I draw the trap card, Solemn Judgment. Next, during my standby phrase, he activates Monster Register, which he can only do by sacrificing 1000 life points. And finally, Revival Gem returns to the field, which promptly kickstarts Monster Register's effect, sending the top 4 cards of my deck to the graveyard. The 4 cards that it sends to the graveyard could have helped me in some way. Monster Reborn, which allows me to special summon a monster from either of our graveyards, wouldn't actually have been beneficial as it would mean another lot of cards taken from my deck. The other 3, Graceful Charity, Ring of Destruction, and Junk Collector, all depends on the given situation as how effective they will be. I set Solemn Judgment face down, and then activate the spell card, Card of Sanctity. In the official trading card game, its effect is very different to that of the anime-only counterpart. Its effect forces you to remove all cards you have on the field and in your hand from play, then draw until you have 2 cards in your hand. Its anime-only counterpart allows both players to draw until they have 6 cards in their hands. I don't know about you, but I prefer latter version. The reason why I set Change of Heart face down is so that when I activate Card of Sanctity, I would have no cards in my hand, which would allow me to draw the maximum of 6 cards. When we've both drawn until we have 6 cards in our hands, I then activate the trap card, Exchange of the Spirit, which, by paying 1000 life points, both our decks swap places with our graveyards. Now, our graveyards become our decks and our decks become our graveyards. I did this because I knew there were some useful cards in my graveyard, including the 2 spell cards, Harpy's Feather Duster, and Ryageki. I set the 2 trap cards, River Arbor, and Magic Cylinder face down. I then activate the spell card, Pot of Greed, which allows me to draw 2 cards from my deck. I then normal summon, Lion-Hearted Locomotive. And yes, I realized the moment I summoned it that the top 4 cards from my deck would be sent to the graveyard. This somewhat turned my plan on its head. I now have less cards in my deck than when I started, which was not the plan. And when I summoned Lion-Hearted Locomotive, it sent 4 quite useful cards to the graveyard. Like I said, when Monster Register is on the field, you have to be very careful, and unfortunately, I wasn't. This could cost me the duel. Turn 18, my opponent now has 7 cards in his hand. He sets 2 of them, his second copy of Monster Register, and Mirror Force, which he also has another copy in his hand. He then activates the spell card, Roll of Fate, which you must roll a 6-sided die. The number it lands on will be the number of cards you are allowed to pick up, but is also the same number of cards that you then must take from the top of your deck to the graveyard. However, I negate the activation of that spell card by activating my trap card, Solemn Judgment, which to do so, I must pay half my life points, which is 3,500 in total. I don't know why I negated Roll of Fate, because there were 2 face-down cards on the field, and they could easily be anything devastating. From we can see from the replay, it's a Mirror Force and another Machine Register. I should have waited to negate the activation of any one of the other 2 cards. Before he ends his turn, he sets his other Mirror Force face down and its counterpart, Dark Mirror Force. Mirror Force negates the attack of any attacking monster, and subsequently destroys any and all face-up attack positioned monsters on my side of the field, whereas Dark Machine Force also negates the attack but destroys all face-up defense positioned monsters on my side of the field. If he activates them both, then he can wipe out my entire field, rendering me totally defenseless. He attacks my revival gem in the attempt to send it to the graveyard so that it can do its thing and send another 4 of my cards to the graveyard, but I prevent him from doing so by activating Magic Cylinder, which negates its attack and inflicts damage to his life points equal to the attacking monster's attack, which in this case is 2300. His life points drop from 4,900 to 2,600. He ends his turn. Turn 19, I draw the trap card, Draining Shield, which I've used once before, so I don't have to explain how it works. That is all that I can do, so I end my turn. Turn 20, my opponent draws Horus level 6, and this is where the title of the duel comes in. He makes a rather very big mistake. He normal summons Horus the Black Flame Dragon in attack position. He also has 2 machine registers on the field, which stack. Because Horus is a level 6 monster, 6 cards are dumped from his deck to the graveyard, and because he has 2 of that trap card, then another 6 is dumped, totaling 12 cards being sent to the graveyard, leaving him with only 1 card in his deck, which he must then draws. He now has 0 cards in his deck. If he does not find a way to put cards back into his deck, then he will lose when it is next turn. He makes the most of the mistake and attacks Revival Gem once more. I prevent it from being destroyed by activating Draining Shield, which boosts my life points up by 2300. My life points increase from 3500 to 5800. He then attacks and successfully destroys Revival Gem with his other monster, which, as you know by now, its effect kicks in. He ends his turn. Turn 21, I draw Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End. Revival Gem comes back to the field. Due to there being 2 machine registers on the field, and Revival Gem being a level 4 monster, 8 cards are dumped into the graveyard, and I only have 8 cards left, meaning I, too, am out of cards. At this point, I could simply end my turn and secure my win, because no matter what happens, I will be the victor in this duel. But he made a very big mistake, and so I was determined not to let him lose because of that. I was going to try and get his life points down to 0 this turn, or indeed get it as close as I possibly could. Here's the thing. Now that I have no cards in my deck, any and all monsters that I summon from now on, the 2 machine registers will still activate, but they can't and won't do anything, so I am free to summon as many monsters as I can this turn. The first monster I summon is the level 8 monster, Ultimate Tyranno. If I still had a deck left, that would mean a grand total of 16 cards removed from my deck. That's a lot of cards. During when Machine Register's effect activates, I activate a trap card of my own, which adds another chain to the link. The trap card in question is known as Graver Auber. This powerful card allows me to special summon any monster from my opponent's graveyard, ignoring any and all summoning conditions. I mentioned at the start of this duel that he has the Egyptian god monster, Slifer the Sky Dragon, hidden somewhere in his deck, which is now his graveyard. I find Slifer and summon it. Slifer's a level 10 monster, which would mean 20 cards being taken from my deck, or in other words, half my deck. But because I have no cards in my deck, I can summon Slifer without worry. Slifer's attack and defense purely relies on how many cards I have in my hand. I have 4 cards in my hand, so Slifer's attack and defense is 4,000. If I were to add another card to my hand, then Slifer's attack would increase to 5,000, but if I were to remove a card from hand, then Slifer's attack would decrease to 3,000. I then, by removing Wall of Illusion, a dark attribute monster, an honest, a light attribute monster, from play, Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End returns to the field in all its glory. I cannot activate its effect this turn, but if I were, my opponent would be receiving 5,400 life points worth of damage, which would ultimately reduce his life points to 0 as he only has 1,600 life points remaining. I enter the battle phrase. Ultimate Tyranno's special ability states that it must be the first monster to attack, and it must also attack all the monsters my opponent has on their side of the field. This effect can be very helpful, as if their monsters have less attack points than Ultimate Tyranno's 3,000, then it can wipe them all out, but if it is to attack a monster that has more attack points, then it will be leading itself into the graveyard. Anyway, Ultimate Tyranno attacked one of his Horus level 6 monsters. He would have lost 700 life points, but instead, he activated a trap card, Mirror Force, which completely obliterated all 4 of my monsters, sending them all to the graveyard. And when I mean all, I mean the Egyptian god monster, Slifer the Sky Dragon as well, because Mirror Force doesn't target, it wipes them all out at once, leaving me with nothing left except a face-down card. That face-down card, Change of Heart, isn't helpful because both Horus level 6 monsters can prevent itself from being affected by it. The same goes for when I activated Snatch Steal. I don't know why I activated both of those spell cards, I just did. I end my turn. Turn 22, due to him not being able to draw a card, he automatically loses the duel. Conclusion: if he hadn't made that mistake, he would still have cards in his deck. I would have carried out the same turn, which would lead me to having no cards in my deck. I would have unleashed and attacked. He would have activated Mirror Force, wiping out all my monsters. That means, he would have drawn next turn, and would be free to attack me head-on without fear of me defending myself in some way. In other words, he could have won the duel if it weren't for that mistake. My deck was strong enough to hold its own throughout the duel, even when so many cards were being dumped into the graveyard. It was only because of me that it didn't do as well as it could have done. We do duel together again, with the same decks. What happens may surprise you. Thanks for watching.